Financial stewardship is an important part of the Christian life. And so one of the things that raises is the question, can I go on vacation? Can I buy a new car? Can I go to dinner with my family without guilt, knowing that people in Japan are suffering, knowing that believers in Africa are struggling, and in some cases suffering from starvation and hunger? And so we really wanted to answer the question, can I do that without guilt? Or must I begin to adopt a mindset that says those things need to be set aside so that I can help provide for other brothers and sisters in need? And to begin this, I'd like to start off with two just general points. The first one is America is materialistic. We struggle with not simply having money, but the love of it. And so it's pretty clear that in our own minds, we have to be careful that we don't adopt the mindset that this is all our doing and this is all for simply our enjoyment, and so everything that we've ever gotten is simply for us. The second point I'd like to make is, as we begin wrestling with this subject of how much should I give and how much can I enjoy for myself, at some point I have to recognize that this can be a slippery slope. After all, if I choose to give up one vacation, I could choose to give up another. And then I could adopt the mindset that something else has to be sacrificed and something else has to be sacrificed, and ultimately lead myself down to the place of asceticism or poverty theology. So that really only those people that are godly are those that drive 20-year-old cars, that people live in beat-up houses, that people who never go out to dinner or enjoy the things that God has created. That's just part of what it means to be a godly believer. And of course, throughout church history, many have ascribed to that kind of thinking. And so I'd like to come at this question by having us reflect just a bit on Old Testament law. We don't believe that the Old Testament law is operative for a New Testament believer. We believe it was abolished. And Jesus, when he went in the holy place with his own blood, not made with hands, but the one in heaven, and sprinkled his blood on the altar, it was in essence an inauguration of the new covenant. And so those same requirements in the law don't exist now. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn anything from them, or that the law was not a proper expression of God's moral law. And so let's just think about the tithes. One of the tithes, there were 3 total, one of the tithes was meant for the care and for the funding of God's work, and it covered the Levites, it covered the priests. It was designed to care for those who had no inheritance of their own and no means of financial gain. A second tithe, we find, was actually a celebration tithe. It was a vacation tithe, if you will, or as some commentators call it, a festival tithe, where the nation was supposed to gather up their tithe and go to Jerusalem. And if they couldn't gather it up and take it because the distance was too far, they were to exchange it for money and take the money to Jerusalem and to have a celebration. And the text clearly explains in Deuteronomy 14 that celebration was fairly wide open. There was a lot of options, or a lot of things that the people could do in celebrating God's goodness to them. And then the third tithe related to a tithe giving in your hometown to those who were poor and needy. In other words, there seems to be a clear picture in these 3 tithes that God in His character wanted to explain to us, His people, that there were several important components to financial stewardship. The first, given by the first tithe, was meant to provide for His work, that there were going to be people that He was going to set apart who were going to be dedicated specifically to His work, and that needed to be funded by everyone. Second, that there was a component of celebration, rejoicing, that God was good to them, and so that was an important component of their financial stewardship. And then third, that there was a concern for the poor and the needy. And whether the second and third tithe was really the same tithe, the second being done, going to Jerusalem 2 out of 3 years, and then 1 year was stay at home, whether those were actually 3 separate tithes, so that 2 were taken 2 years and then 3 were taken the 3rd year, that's still open for debate, but the points still remain. And so let's come back to our question. How does the Old Testament law inform, and the tithes inform, can we enjoy luxuries? And here's the key questions I think we have to answer. One is, if we're going to go on vacation, and if we're going to buy a car, and if we're going to go out to dinner, and if we're going to enjoy the good things which God has given, which 1 Timothy 6:17 encourages us to do, then we need to ask ourselves the question, are we really celebrating God's goodness? Or are we simply celebrating how wonderful, or how smart, or how gifted, or how rich we are? The second, then, is, do we have a place in our financial stewardship for caring for the poor and needy? Is that a component, or would we have to say honestly that, no, we don't have that? And I think if you can say this, yes, we have a place in our financial stewardship for the poor and needy. Yes, we are interested in caring for other believers here and around the world. And that when we go and celebrate, we genuinely are celebrating God's goodness. Then we can go on vacation. We can buy a car. We can go out to dinner. In fact, we can celebrate a lot of things simply because God has been good to us.